Childy! So yesterday we started this story, didn't we? It is a little bit scary, but don't worry because it's just fiction. It's not real, it's just made up. So we had our 3 children, big one in the middle and teeny tiny, and they had ended up sleeping in a house that had a fence made of bones. And the old lady, we think, is a witch and she wants to eat them. So we'll find out what happens today. Do you think they're going to escape or do you think they're going to get eaten? This was indeed the house of the witch woman their granny had told them about. Teeny Tiny tiptoed back to bed. As he lay there, he could see the old woman tying pieces of rope together. He could hear her sharpening and sharpening a great long knife. And all the while she hummed a sleepy song. After a while the old woman called, "Who is asleep and who is awake?" Now the others were asleep, but Teeny Tiny was not. "The littlest one is awake," he answered. "What? Teeny Tiny, why don't you sleep?" asked the old woman. "Well, Auntie, my mother always cooks me an egg before I go to bed. Then I go to sleep," said Teeny Tiny. So the old woman cooked an egg and Teeny Tiny ate it, but still he did not go to sleep. After a while she called again, "Who is awake and who is asleep?" "The littlest one is awake," answered Teeny Tiny. "What? Still awake? What will help you get to sleep?" the old woman asked. "Well, Auntie, my mother gives me popcorn and raisins to eat at bedtime. Then I go to sleep." So the old woman brought him popcorn and raisins, but still he did not go to sleep. "Who is awake and who is asleep?" "The littlest one is awake," answered Teeny Tiny. "What? Still awake, are you? What can I get you that will help you to sleep?" she asked. "Well, Auntie, all that popcorn has made me thirsty. At home, when I am thirsty, my mother goes to the well to fetch me water in a sieve. When she brings it back, I drink it. Then I go to sleep," said Teeny Tiny. As the old woman bent over to fetch her sieve, a cake of soap fell out of her apron pocket. "Oh dear," the old woman mumbled aloud. "My magic objects. Better to leave them here safe than lose them outside in the dark by the well." She picked up the cake of soap, then reaching into her apron pocket, she took out what was left, a needle and a short, sharp knife, and she laid all 3 things on a high shelf. Then she opened the door softly and started towards the well. All along, Teeny Tiny had been listening very carefully. As soon as the old woman was gone, he shook his brothers. "Wake up," he whispered. "Auntie is that witch woman. Her fence is made of people's bones, and she has already sharpened her long knife. If we do not hurry, we'll be her dinner tomorrow." Big One and In the Middle heard him, and how they scrambled out of bed. As they were running through the door, Teeny Tiny remembered the magic objects the witch woman had so carefully laid on the high shelf: a cake of soap, a needle, and a short, sharp knife. "Lift me up," he said to Big One. "If she says they're magic, they just may be magic. I'll take them along and see." 1, 2, 3, he tucked them into his pocket and then ran with his brothers down the moonlit path. So there we've got the soap, the knife and the needle, and you can see that the brothers are getting the objects. Does that remind you of any stories? A witch with magic objects? Yeah, like Baba Yaga. As for the old woman, she couldn't catch any water in the sieve. And she couldn't catch any water in the sieve. Do you know what a sieve is? We use it to drain things or you sieve flour if you're baking sometimes. Some people do. So basically it has lots of holes in it so that you can drain things. So if you've got like rice with water in it and you pour it, the water goes out but the rice stays in the sieve. So you can't get water in a sieve because it has holes in it. And because witches are not very bright without their magic, she couldn't understand why. So home she went. When she looked for Teeny Tiny, he was gone, and so were his brothers. So away she went, running after them. Now Teeny Tiny was watching behind him, As the old woman came closer and closer, he took out the cake of soap. "I'll try this first," he said. "If it isn't magic, at least she may slip on it, and then we can get away from her." And he threw the cake of soap right into her path. She cried, "You took my magic soap from my little shelf." And she shook her fist at Teeny Tiny. Just then the cake of soap began to grow and grow. It became a mountain, slippery all around. The boys kept on running, glad of that soap. But the old woman slipped and slithered, trying to get up over the mountain. "It's no use," she said at last. "I'll run around it." And she ran and ran till she came to the other side. "Now I'll catch you," she cried, and Teeny Tiny heard her. They kept running and running till Teeny Tiny could hear the witch woman's apron flapping. So look, that's the soap mountain, and there she is. Then carefully he picked the needle out of his pocket. "Whether it's magic or not, I'll prick her with this sharp needle," he said to himself. But whoops! It slipped out of his hand and fell behind him. She cried the witch woman, "You found my magic needle too!" And she shook her fist at Teeny Tiny. At that moment the needle began to grow and grow until it became a whole mountain of needles, all sticky and pricky and sharp as they could be. Well, the boys ran on, but the witch woman had to stop because of the needles. She tried and tried to get over those needles. At last she said, "It's no use. I'll run around them." And she ran and ran till she came to the other side. "Now I'll catch you," she cried. They kept running and running. Teeny Tiny could hear the old woman panting and puffing just behind them. With all his strength, he threw the knife on the path, right in front of the witch woman. "It's our only chance," he said. "If it isn't magic, at least she may cut her foot on it, and then we can get away from her." "Oh," she cried, "you took my magic knife too!" And she shook her fists at Teeny Tiny. At that moment, crick, crack, that sharp knife cut a crack in the earth so long and so wide that the witch woman couldn't run around it, and she couldn't jump over it. Shaking both fists, she shouted, "I'll get you next time!" And she turned around and hobbled home. So that actually might give you some ideas for when you change your story, because she had 3 magic objects that were different to the ones that Baba Yaga had. The 3 boys never stopped running till they got to their own house. As for that witch woman, may she wait a long, long time before she hears a knock at her door again. So it's a happy ending. I really like that story, and it does really remind me of Baba Yaga. There's some really similar things, don't you think? Okay, I really hope you enjoyed all our stories, and I will see you soon for another story. Bye, Wildie.